Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. It's actually just one guy and a stack of comics again this week. Mike has found himself a little bit indisposed for the next couple of days. So we've had some videos that have posted the last couple of days. That's some stuff that we recorded. Mike should hopefully be back next week with what's in the stack. So I know it's not quite the same without him. Definitely miss him having being on here, but wanted to just continue to go through what is in our stack for the week. Kind of talked about Mike with the books that he picked up, and then just going through what was good and what was bad. And I have to say, I think for this year, this might have been one of the best days, Wednesdays in comic books this year. And then we had a lot of really strong offerings. I think for me, this was as big as my stack has really been this year. I think 10 or 12 books for this week. But I think this week was interesting for a couple reasons. I think there is such a stark contrast right now in what the indies are doing and what the mainstream books are doing. And I'll kind of excuse DC. I think DC put out some strong offerings and has been doing really, really well lately. But I think contrasting the indie books versus Marvel is sort of interesting in that the 3 or 4 best books that I read this week were Conan number 20, Flash Gordon number 8, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 8, and Redcoat number 11. The by far struggling books that I read this week was Wolverine number 8, which is 400. Ultimate Wolverine number 4, which is a series I've liked, except this issue was a bit much. And Iron Man, which is again on another title, the Insurgent Iron Man number 7. There's such a huge contrast in these books. And so I'll kind of talk about the Marvel books first and then go through what I loved about the indies and kind of go through those individually. Starting kind of with Iron Man. And this extends a bit to Wolverine too. Iron Man is one of the most fun characters in all of comic books. I think he is a character that, for so much of his history, yes, you've got stuff like Demon in a Bottle. That's a classic and really showed Tony's struggles. But for a good majority of Iron Man stories and the presentation of the character in media has been about Tony Stark just being a really genius billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, fun character. And lately with Iron Man, it is like Marvel Comics just does not like that character at all. And that this comic book is just chock full of so many boring, overly dialogue heavy scenes. The action scenes are just so brief and just are nonsensical, and that 1 second something's happened and the very next the fight is just over on kind of like a MacGuffin surprise thing that happens. Iron Man is in situations where he has no armor, and then, oh wait, but in West Coast Avengers I'm using this armor, so I have that armor now, even though the story was telling it. And it's all over the place. It doesn't really make a ton of sense. And then the other problem that we have is this book, the first few pages are all about, influencers and people covering Tony Stark announcing to redo weapons again because he's trying to kind of undermine Doom, who's taken over the world. And it's chock full of all the things you would expect, that the heavy-handed politics, the current day references that are going to age awfully, that 10 years from now someone's going to pick this up and go, what the heck are they talking about? It's just so interesting to see Marvel just doesn't seem to want Iron Man to be Iron Man. That this is a book that's heavy with politics now and heavy with just so many different things that don't make sense, that aren't fun. It's crazy that I've been reading the character for so long now, and they just never seem to want him to be himself. There almost seems like this, well, he used to be a weapons dealer, so we have to make sure that this book just overly condemns everything about it. He's a 1%er, so we have to make sure that we condemn everything about it. And it's just this mix where realism and the desire of writers to make sure that modern day issues are at the forefront of comics it just disables them from writing a fun Iron Man comic book. And I think it's just so sad because it's such a great character. There could be so many cool adventures with him, so many things that you could do. And instead, it's just always grappling with the same 2 to 3 storylines of Tony's past and what's he going to do with the company and is he really the good guy? And it's tiring. It's nothing I think that Iron Man fans want to see. And it's why the book has to get canceled every 10 to 12 issues and renumbered, or maybe it'll run 20 and then it goes again. We just can't get a creative team that seems to have any identity for Iron Man anymore. And it's just really sad to see because it is such a good character. It's such a wasted potential for him. By that same token, my favorite Marvel character, Wolverine. And this is issue 8, which of course will cost you $7.99. Now you do get a pretty decent page count, and I will say it's not the worst issue of this series so far. But we have Wolverine at this point has a teenage Wendigo that he's working with continually series. There was a ton of buildup between Wolverine and this epic fight that he was going to have with Romulus, who's a villain I'm not the biggest fan of. But the fight is very, very brief. It ends, I believe, before the 7th or 8th page of the book. And it's just, again, Wolverine comics used to be so visceral and used to be, brutal to read, and that was what was great about the character, is that he was the one character they could kind of unleash the action with, and they don't do that anymore with him. It's so much about him trying to recover from what he was, and again, it's cool to see the character evolve, but not to the point that he doesn't feel like the character anymore. And so there is a backup story where Wolverine gets captured by Arcade, and it's decently fun. It's a very paint by numbers kind of Wolverine adventure in there. But the Romulus portion, which the first 7 issues we're dealing with, it is over so fast. The section with Arcade is a bit longer than that. And then at the end, they do this thing where Wolverine returns this teenage Wendigo kid back to his mom. The kid has kind of lost the Wendigo abilities, and we start talking about Logan's mom all of a sudden, and then it ends with Logan getting a letter from his mom. And to me, it's just such a weird thing to see Wolverine now, like his mom's coming back to life now. I guess you could say something like, hey, the powers came from her, maybe she's a mutant too. It's just they've done so much with Wolverine lately, and I think ever since the comic book origin that gave us, I think, the answer to questions that I don't know we ever should have had answered. I think one of the great things about Wolverine was the mystery of his past and how much we didn't know. And I just don't know. It's kind of like Ledger in The Dark Knight. I don't know that it was ever a good idea to give him a backstory. I think that's why Ledger's Joker was so great in that movie, is you could kind of fill in the blanks. And that was the cool thing with Wolverine, is because he never really had this definitive origin. He never really had what was his birth name. That added so much to the character. And I know Origin's an older story at this point, but I just think ever since we've dove into that and we gave Wolverine that, the character's just lost something. There's something about him that just writers don't seem to be able to explore those great kind of stories the way that they used to. And so it's just really weird to see 2 of Marvel's best characters both in comics that just seem to either not really like the character or want the character to be something else so badly. And it's not even something where like the characters are evolving to a natural point where, it makes sense and it's character development driven. Instead, it just kind of seems to be like they don't care about what the character is. They had a story in mind and they put the character into that story regardless of whether it fit for them or not. And so it's so weird to see Marvel do that with these books because there are such great characters there. Contrast that with what the indie do. You have Conan number 20 this week. Again, another incredible issue of Conan, kind of deals with the events of the last issue where he runs into the warrior Zula that he's working with, and there's a great fight sequence in this. You have kind of Conan's been dealing with this wound that sort of poisoned him, and so Zula was sort of coming after him because the wound had infected Conan and sort of like almost possessed him. It's just the great thing about this book is that no matter what's happening, there is just such good action. There's such great art on each page from Doug Brathwaite in this comic book, and it fully embraces who Conan is. He's brutal, he's efficient in the fights, he never gives up. We see the spirit of that character, we see his honor code. It's just so weird to see a character like Conan, who has a relatively short comic book history in comparison to someone like Wolverine, where Conan is much more known for the books and for the movies, and yes, he's got an amazing comic book legacy. But to see a company like Titan that just recently got the character, almost 2 years ago, and they just seem to have a better understanding and sense of the character than Marvel does with one of their greatest characters in Wolverine and one of their most popular characters now in Iron Man. And so Conan number 20, I would absolutely recommend it. It's a fantastic story. If you're not on the Conan bandwagon, Mike and I have done a lot of videos on Conan. It just continues to be a fantastic book. The other one that continues to deliver is Flash Gordon. This is Flash Gordon number 8. Jeremy Adams, I just have to say, I think he is one of the best writers we've seen in a very long time. Whether it is DC stuff like Flash or Green Lantern, now he's working with Aquaman. He's doing such a great job on this book. It's such a fun, escapist sci-fi adventure. And again, it seems like he understands the spirit of this character. Flash Gordon is just fun sci-fi storytelling. There isn't deconstruction things happening. We don't have to examine the soul of Flash Gordon and who he is as a character. Very similarly to Conan, it is just let the character loose, tell a great adventure story. Little twists and turns here and there that make it fun. We don't really know what's going on with Dale, his main love interest in here, and it kind of seems there's some major events happening. But the character is suitably heroic. There's great action sequences in it. And while Will Conrad is the regular artist on this book, I think it's Tom Derenick on the art here. Just again, this is what I love about what the indie books like this are doing. The average art and sort of 2-page spreads that are in this. You're getting so much detail. You're getting so much attention to what's going on. The fight scenes all seem more, thought out, choreographed. The action all kind of makes sense. Whereas the big two right now with some of them, it just seems like they kind of lose track of that. It's like they're so busy putting a million bubble dialogues in, they forget it's a comic book. It needs to have some action in it. I think the same thing you can say for Redcoat number 11. This finally introduces the Northerner character that's been teased in Ghost Machine for a really long time. And again, it just tells a great story. You get Brian Hitch on the art, just doing such a great job with it. And there's some mystery about this Northerner character and who he is and what his role is going to be. But it's such a fun book. Redcoat does such a good job every month of just kind of capturing your attention as a reader, throwing you into a kind of isolated adventure that's fun. This one does end in a to be continued, but it's just so well thought out. And I think that's where some of these indies like these three are really separating themselves from what Marvel and DC are doing, is that there's just such a disjointed feel in some of those. Whereas Redcoat, Conan, Flash Gordon, they're all doing such an amazing job of putting together stories that build each month, that celebrate the characters that are in it, and just seem so exquisitely well drawn, as opposed to what we kind of get from the big two, where it just seems like every month we have cycles of those. So those three were great. The other great book that I thought was great this way, TMNT. I got to say, I'm really loving Jason Aaron on this book. And I am not the biggest Jason Aaron fan. He's written a lot of comics I'm not a fan of. I think he really gets the Turtles. And I think one of the things about the TMNT, it's such an interesting brand because you have a comic book past that is so mired in kind of violence and very brutal stuff, and then marry that to the very kid-friendly approach of the Turtles. And so I think he's done such a good job in this of kind of capturing a little bit of that older spirit where it's more serious. There's a lot of great action and fight scenes, but capturing the essence of what everybody loves about the characters enough that if you're someone who likes the animated series and things like that, you're going to recognize that. And I think he's hit a real sweet spot of finding the heart of who these characters are. There's some really interesting things happening with Donatello in the book where he kind of went through some trauma, and so he's processing all kinds of things. And I just think the mystery of that, I think especially using Donatello for that, was such a great call by Jason Aaron, because of the four turtles, he seems to be the one that seems to get the least amount of focus and seems to have, Raphael always gets to be, out there and be the more violent and angry one. Leonardo, the leader, kind of fits into that staunch Captain America kind of role. Michelangelo is kind of always the star for people, and with the Last Ronin and stuff like that, he's always been explored. Donatello's always sort of felt lost. And so I love that Jason Aaron has a lot of focus on him on the book. I think he's writing the dynamics of the characters really well. Juan Ferreira just does really great job on the art. And again, this is what I love about what we're seeing from some of these indie books is there's just so much well thought out stuff, the choreography of the fighting scenes, the attention to detail and the backgrounds and stuff like that. It just seems like with some of these books, they're doing such a great job, and you can tell with Conan, Flash Gordon, TMNT, there's a passion behind the writers who are doing this. They don't seem like they're writing the book to try to change the characters. It seems like these are lifelong fans of these characters who really want to write a great story for the fan base. And so TMNT #8, really, really good. If you're like me and you've been off Turtles for a while, Last Ronin was really all I had read from you for years. This relaunch that Jason Aaron's done has been fantastic. Would definitely recommend it. I think it's worth your time if you're a TMNT fan. If you've checked out for a long time on them, and I know IDW is doing some stuff that I really did not like with them in the last couple of years, Jason Aaron's relaunch has been really, really solid. Thus far, it would definitely be one of the 10 best comic books of this year. He's doing a great job there. So, indies really dominating the week. 4 great indie books that I'd recommend. Some other ones I'll talk about here briefly. Ultimate Wolverine. This is the best X-Men book that's out there, but I think this was the worst issue of it so far. The art is fantastic from Alessandro Cappuccio. He does a great job in this. The only issue with this is sort of telling the Weapon X, or the Winter Soldier, as they're calling him in this series, origin story, and kind of showing how he became mind controlled and taken over. It's an interesting story they're telling. The only issue is, despite the fact that Alessandro Cappuccio is just killing it on the art and all this, they kind of juxtaposition Wolverine's situation where he's kind of coming out of his like coma sort of thing after the Weapon X procedure, and this fight between a wolf and a bear. And it's a metaphor, it does work, but the wolf and the bear fight is actually, I believe, about 18 pages in this book. And so while the art is fantastic, again, I'll kind of show that two-page spread there. He did such a good job in this book. You do kind of wonder, like, it's a Wolverine book and he's really only like 2 panels. And I get it. They're trying to show it's very similar to him fighting along with it. It just carries on a little bit too long. Again, though, I mean, that is just such great art from Cappuccio. He's doing such a good job on that. There is some really cool revelations about how they've kept Wolverine under control, and sort of the reveal of what's happened to Jean Grey. And then as they've been doing in this comic, there's sort of an info dump kind of page at the end that reveals the fate of Charles Xavier. I still love this book. I'm still in on it. I just think this was the weakest issue, in that while Cappuccio's art is really, really good, it just takes a little too long with the narrative, juxtaposition they're doing of that fight and what's happening with Wolverine. So a little bit disappointing, but I do think if you like that series, it continues to be pretty good. The last 3 books I'll sort of mention, I think DC Comics had 3 winners for this week. Batman Detective Comics 1096, Tom Taylor, and then you've had Michael Janin on the art on this. Michael Janin is just such a great artist. He draws the characters so well. I think, the way he draws kind of the action sequences, and just, I love the way he draws Batman. I think he's one of the better modern Batman artists that we have. I gotta say, I think Tom Taylor crafted together a really good 6-issue arc to open this in on. There's a little bit of a narrative thing where at times Tom Taylor's not exactly subtle, and so it's not going to be for everybody, but I was really worried with him taking over Detective Comics. So far through 6 issues, he's proven me wrong. This is an interesting sort of storyline that they put together. He does a great job of mixing in enough action and enough narrative that it kind of captures the spirit of it. And I will say, at least through 6 issues, he's had a really good voice for both Batman and Bruce Wayne as characters. I think he's put some really interesting pieces together in it. And I liked the way that this kind of weaved. They revealed at the beginning Thomas Wayne saved Joe Chill's life before Joe Chill killed him. And I think it's an interesting way that he kind of weaved in Batman's no-kill rule. I'm a huge fan of the Batman no-kill rule. I think it's what makes him a great superhero. I absolutely love that. And I thought he did a great job of weaving that together. I have my doubts about Tom Taylor long-term on a book, but so far his Detective Comics has been really, really good. I would absolutely recommend that to folks. The other Batman-related book this week, World's Finest. This is issue 38. Mark Waid on this. I think Henry's on the art on it. Pretty cool story of Batman working with Superman and the Flash's Gorilla Grodd is in this. This is the part of an event that DC's doing called We Are Yesterday. It's going to run through the pages of World's Finest and Justice League. So while I'm not a huge fan of events overall, and I do wish All In had gone a little longer before we got into an event, at least it's going to be Mark Waid writing throughout, and it's not doing one of those things where it drops into a million books with different narratives. What World's Finest does so good is it captures the spirit of these characters kind of for any fan. If you are a fan of Superman, of Batman, The Flash appears in this book as well. If you're just a general DC fan who doesn't want to get mired in a ton of continuity, who's a little bit tired of like all the different changes and things, and you just want to see the characters as you recognize them. I think this is a great book. If you're someone who likes like the Justice League animated series, and that's kind of your way that you see these characters, Mark Waid just has such a good voice for these characters and writing them in a way that if you've ever been a fan of Batman or Superman, you can pick it up, you see the character, they're recognizable. The art in this is pretty good, and there's some interesting things with sort of Gorilla Grodd happening in here. I think he's such an interesting and kind of cool villain, and they use him really well in this book. I thought the Flash had a really good appearance in it as well. Definitely enjoyable one. I don't know, how the event is going to shape up overall. It seems like there's a lot of Legion of Doom stuff happening. Overall, really good opening salvo for it and a satisfying issue on its own. So if you aren't like fully sold out for the event and you just want an enjoyable comic book, I think this does a really good thing there. Last book I'd recommend, Absolute Flash #2. Jeff Lemire and I think it's Nick Robles on the art. Pretty interesting chapter. We kind of fully meet the rogues in this, and I do think the art kind of stands out quite a bit in this. There is some interesting changes made to the characters as the Absolute Universe sort of does. In this situation, the rogues characters that you kind of see here on the cover, they actually are like assigned military folks who are hunting Wally West in this book. And so I thought that was an interesting choice to make with the book. There is some things that get dropped in here about the Flash kind of seeing different timelines and things like that. And so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. It also sort of has some interesting things about Barry Allen's fate. It seemed pretty clear he was dead in the first issue. This kind of opens up some open-ended things about what's happening with him. What I will say from this, I think Jeff Lemire is going to do a great job on the Flash overall, and that I think he seems to kind of get some of the narrative concepts that make Flash comics interesting, with sort of the time travel element, and I thought his use of the rogues, while not perfect, was interesting as well. And so I think for a fresh starting on point for someone, if you've checked out from the Flash for a while, this is really, really interesting. I don't know if I'd say it's like a great book. I don't know if I'd tell run out and buy it, but I do think if you want something, if you like the Flash, you want to get involved in that world of that character, I think it's a pretty good starting point. I think it's done pretty well. I don't think it was as good as the first issue. I was a really huge fan of the first issue. I know not everybody was, but I do think it was a suitable follow-up, and I definitely have some interest in what they're going to do with the comic going forward. So overall, I think a really strong week of comic books. The indies just continue to kill it, and I'll say I think DC has taken some really great steps forward this week as well. Since Mike is not here, I want to make sure I get into books that were important to him this week as well, which is a couple Facsimilie books. Fantastic Four, #4, reprinted this week. You get all the classic ads, all the Fantastic Four goodness. This is the reappearance of Namor in the Fantastic Four. Just great stuff. And if you want to see some great Kirby artwork, you get some great stuff in here. It's so much fun to read these older books, and given the interest in the movie and all that, it'll be interesting to see if some of these kind of catch up with readers. It seems like if you want the real Fantastic Four, you got to get it here. It doesn't appear that the movie's really going to do that. But overall, really cool to see that in Facsimilie form. And then you had Batman 615. This is continuing the Hush reprints that they're doing while they're publishing the sequel to Hush. You just forget sometimes how great Jim Lee's art is with Batman. I mean, you just have stuff like this. And if you haven't read Hush in a while, it's great to capture it in single issue format. It's a fantastic, fantastic story with some of the greatest comic book art of all time. So 2 really cool facsimiles for this week, one from Marvel and one from DC. Let us know, what do you guys think below? Mike and I will kind of look at the comments. We'll respond on here. He's in the comments as well. He's a little busier, so sometimes he can't appear on these videos here on the weekends, but he definitely takes a look at the comments. So let us know what you guys think. What is in your stack? What are you reading? What are you enjoying? And do you kind of feel like me, where it sort of seems like the indies have a better understanding of their characters right now than the big two? As always, folks, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're a sports fan, hope you enjoy the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs as they kick off. God bless you. You have a great rest of your day, folks.